Morning. Hello, my kako. Good morning. This is Dan Giovanni. I am the chair for the Land Use Commission meeting today, June 22nd, 2023. This is an in-person meeting, which is being held at the Hilo Hawaiian Hotel, Mala'ikena Room at 71 Banyan Drive in Hilo, Hawaii, 96720. And this meeting is open to the public. Court reporting transcriptions are being done from this Zoom meeting recording. For all meeting participants, I'd like to stress the importance of speaking slowly, clearly, and directly into your microphone. And before speaking, please state your name and identify yourself for the record. Now, even though this is an in-person meeting, please be aware that all meeting participants are being recorded on the digital record of this Zoom meeting. Your continued participation is your implied consent to be part of this public record of this event. If you do not wish to be part of the public record, you should exit the meeting now. I also share that from time to time, we'll be taking breaks, nominally about 5 to 10 minutes every hour. And if the meeting proceeds through lunchtime, we'll probably take a break for lunch as well. But we'll just make those decisions on the fly. My name is Dan Giovanni. I have the pleasure to serve as the LUC chair. We currently have 9 seated commissioners. Along with me, we have 7 commissioners in attendance today. Ms. Nancy Cabral, representing Hawaii Island. This is actually her last meeting serving her 8-year term. So we welcome, and with great grief, we say aloha to Ms. Nancy today.
Thank you.
We also have Gary Okuda, Mel Kahele, Kuiki Kamakea Ohelo, Mr. George Ata, and Brian Lee from Oahu. 2 commissioners are excused today, Michael Yamani from Kauai, and Commissioner Lee Ohigashi, who's ill, is excused today. He's from Maui. Also in attendance are the LUC Executive Officer, Daniel Orendenker, LUC Chief Planner, Scott Derrickson, LUC Staff Planner, Riley Hakoda, LUC Staff Planner, Martina Segura, LUC Chief Clerk, Ariana Kwan, and to my left is the LUC Attorney General, Ms. Julie China. Our next order of business today is a status and progress report from A02-737, University of Nations, BENCORP, Hawaii Island. This is a status and progress report, and potentially the commission may take some action in response to the recently submitted 2022 annual reports. At this point, I'd like the parties to introduce themselves for the record, starting with the petitioner. The orange button, the light goes on.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Derek Simon, appearing on behalf of University of the Nations Kona. With me today, seated to my left is Jeffrey Overton of Group 70 International. In the audience is Catherine Garson of my firm, David Hamilton, President CEO of the University of the Nations Kona, as well as various other members of the university, including those involved with the project development.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. From the state.
Good morning, Allison Kato, Deputy Attorney General for the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
Thank you, Ms. Kato, and from the County of Hawaii.
Good morning. Deputy Corporation Counsel Susanna Tiapula, representing Planning Deputy Director.
Morning, Chair, Commissioners. Deputy Director Darrow with the County of Hawaii Planning Department. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Let me briefly explain our procedure for today. First, I will update the record. Next, I will recognize any written public testimony that has been submitted in this matter, identifying the person or organizations who have submitted the testimony. Next, I will call on members of the public who wish to testify on the status and progress report. Members of the public will each have 2 minutes to provide their testimony and should stand by afterward to respond to any questions that our parties or the commissioners may have. When all questions have been completed, the chair will excuse the witness and call the next witness to enter and give testimony. After completion of the public testimony of the proceedings, the chair would like the petitioner to provide its status report. The chair will then call on the county's planning department, the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development for comments regarding the status report. The petitioner will then be allowed to respond to comments made by the county and the state. The commissioners will ask questions of the parties at the conclusion of each of their presentations. At the conclusion of the party's testimony and the commissioners' questions, the public will again be granted a second opportunity to provide public testimony in the same manner that was set forth previously. Once the public testimony concludes, the commission will enter deliberations regarding the status report and whether any action is to be taken. Again, the chair would like to note that from time to time, I will be calling short breaks. And I ask you now, are there any questions from the parties regarding our procedure for today? Mr. Simon.
None from petitioner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. State.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. County.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Regarding the record, please be informed that the relevant records and documents pertaining to this matter can be accessed for review on the LUC website at luc.hawaii.gov/A02-737, specifically under the tab Pending Dockets. Interested parties are welcome to review the documents at their leisure and convenience. Right now, we will commence with public testimony on this matter. Ms. Kwan, have we received any written testimony submitted on this matter?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Kwan, are there anyone here today who have signed up for public testimony?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair. I hate to interrupt. I believe there was one public comment letter submitted from the Hawaii County Police Department.
Let the record. Can we get update on that, Ms. Kwan? What did we receive?
June 20th, we received County of Hawaii Police Department written testimony.
Okay, thank you. And that's available for anybody to review on the website, correct? Very good. Thank you, Mr. Simon. Okay. Mr. Simon, we'll now proceed with your presentation. Can you give us an indication of the scope and duration that you plan for your prepared remarks and presentation?
Absolutely, Chair. We have Mr. Overton and myself have a somewhat brief presentation, briefer than the November status report. I expect it to take maybe an hour.
Okay.
With or without questions thereabouts.
Is it a presentation that we'll see?
I do. I have a PowerPoint here.
Okay, and we ask that you make a copy of the PowerPoint available to our staff so we can include it on the record.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Minimize some of these boxes. There we go. Again, good morning, Commissioner, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Derek Simon, appearing on behalf of the University of the Nations Kona. Today, myself and Mr. Overton here will be presenting the status report. We want to start off by thanking the commission, staff, the county, and OPSD for their time today. As some of you know, or all of you should know, this docket was last before the commission on November 2nd, 2022 for a status report. That report kind of had two components. First, you heard from Mr. David Hamilton, President and CEO, University of the Nations. he started off by explaining to the commission a little bit about what the university does. That is part of a global network of religious-based educational institutions. Provided kind of an overview of the services they provide to underserved communities, both in Kona and globally. And I think that gave the commission sort of a good update, good refresher on who the petitioner is here. It had been some time since it had been before the commission. We spoke a little bit about COVID, the impacts of COVID and sort of the recovery from COVID. Mr. Hamilton spoke to the fact that enrollment had returned to pre-COVID levels and was trending in a positive direction. He also reported that the last fiscal year for the university was the strongest fiscal year they had had. And that both those, and I can tell you today that both those trends continue. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the university's financing model. It's a nonprofit-based fundraising financing model. I think myself had done a poor job of explaining that model to the commission in the past. I think that led to some confusion and uncertainty as to the viability and really practical implications of that nonprofit financing model. And Mr. Hamilton spoke to how widespread that really is with large nonprofits, from the Red Cross down to much smaller organizations. Mr. Hamilton presented a slideshow that showed just a handful of campuses across the globe that the university and the larger organizations developed using that model. I think the commission was left with a better understanding of the fundraising financing model they use and how viable it is. And Mr. Hamilton finished his presentation with making some strong commitments to the commission. He wanted to remind the commission that the university is not an absent landowner. It operates immediately next door to the current petition area. He also wanted to emphasize that they're not engaged in land speculation. They're fully committed to developing the master plan. This has been part of their mission and goals for some time. And even with prior struggles that they've explained to the commission, there was never any intention or desire to sell the petition area. He also wanted to reaffirm that there's no changes, changes to the scope or substance or nature of the master plans being pursued as it was presented. At that time, it had been last presented in July 2020. And today it remains an expansion of the existing campus. Again, that is immediately next door. And then he also committed to proceeding with the EIS diligently and to file that within this first half of 2023. And we can report today that we're on track for that submission deadline. The commission then heard from Mr. Overton. He gave sort of a high level overview of the land use planning considerations for the petition area. He kind of laid out the reasons why the petition area is an appropriate piece of land for the urban district and appropriate for the master plan development that they're pursuing at the moment. He talked about the significant restrictions on agricultural use on the land, including poor soils, geography, topography, and so on and so forth. And then Mr. Overton got a little bit into the changes in the master plan that were being made, that have been made since then, that they were working on at that time. And that's more or less where we left off. Following that November 2nd, 2022 status report, the commission did issue an order or a decision on the status report on December 8th. Under that decision, the 2022 annual report and supplemental annual report were accepted as satisfying the annual reporting obligations under the 2003 decision and order. The commission ordered that the draft EIS be submitted to the commission by the end of June 2023. I don't remember if it was first half or before the end of June, and continue to keep the university on an ongoing as scheduled yearly annual status report. So that brings us here today. Mr. Overton is going to speak in a moment and provide you with an update on the master plan and the status of the environmental impact statement. Thank you.
Mr. Overton, I'm going to swear you in. Please state your name and affiliation.
Jeff Overton, I'm a principal planner with D70 in Honolulu.
You swear that the testimony today will be the truth?
I do.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. It's nice to be before you today in Hilo. I always love traveling to Hilo for these meetings. I wish I was here last night for dinner. It's a good news report today. You know, we were tasked at the November status update to giddy up, get the draft EIS pulled together. I believe the chair characterized it as a bulletproof EIS is what he is seeking to be submitted by end of the second quarter of 23. And we're on track as Mr. Simon said, we're on track to meet that obligation. So I'll give you just kind of a high level update on the work we've accomplished. Everybody's had a chance to look at EISs. I've actually got a hard copy. You can tell from the scope of it or the thumb, it's hefty. There's 14 technical appendices to the EIS. And this is the bedtime reading volume here, which is a little more accessible, the front part of it. We're just in the final strokes on this and intend to submit it to your staff for review by the 30th. And so we're on track with that. As you know, EIS has these in-depth technical studies that we need to address. There's had already been a lot of work done on technical studies in the past, in particular the cultural and archaeological and all the pieces for that. But the updates that we went through for this process, updating the preliminary infrastructure, the civil engineering study done by G70, the civil engineers at our shop, along with an infrastructure concept master plan. We already had in hand the earlier environmental planning report and the natural resource studies done by ECOS. We had update to the what we call a traffic study, or now calling mobility analysis report by Fair and Peers. So we have that. It's an important study for this EIS. We had an updated water study by Tom Nance. And based on input we received in the March 2021 scoping meeting, it's been a while, we had a request to do a noise study. So we did an acoustical analysis by Hawai'i and Associates to include in here. So take some time to get those pieces together and then compile it in a document that's going to go through a proper review process. So that's kind of an update on the technical studies. As for the plan, so we're still calling this the 2020 master plan, but as you know, master plans, you take a look at them 6 months later and you go, we really should have done this instead of that. And so no real heavy programmatic shifts at all since we last discussed things. We made some site adjustments and shifted, relocated some facilities, primarily trying to make this make more sense for community access. Before, we had some facilities where you had to really penetrate deep into the campus, for example, to get to the athletic complex or the school element, the lower school elements. So we've shifted things a little more Mackay that are focused on the community support elements. And I think it makes a lot of sense from access and circulation and sort of segregating what is the university functions from the more community-centered or shared components of it. And so you'll see we've shifted the athletic complex downhill. It works a little better with the grades as well in terms of how our light touch on the site, which we've said has always been a mission for us to touch the site as lightly as possible, maintaining open space where we can, and really design with nature as best we can. Working with topography and minimizing grading. Another important piece in sort of optimizing our plan was something that we heard from the commission on the last go round. There was some discussion about the students and faculty living in the community and the pressure that adds to an already tight housing supply in the Kailua-Kona region. And so we've added dorms on the site that support primarily increasing faculty support on site with these dorms. But we have this sort of integrated model of students and faculty that have kind of combined integrated living circumstances. So ultimately that helps us with the pressure in the community for affordable housing needs out there. and integrating it here, we've got that capability with dorms on the project. So that's kind of high level. I hadn't intended to do a whole careful cross analysis, and the EIS spells it out pretty clearly when we put it before you. Next slide. We had just an image that we were carrying forward that reflects the approach to design. And Francis Oda gave a nice design presentation to the commission when we were at NELHA a year or so back. And this again reflects the design. This is not an urban college campus. We're in Kailua Kona, so we're going to have lower rise buildings, 1-story, 2-story buildings. You can see the way we're working with hip roof design that's really complementary to the Kailua Kona character and setting, very loose. This maybe is a little greener than it may actually end up being, but working to vegetate with xeriscape type plants and low water tolerant plants, but there would be landscaping. So it's going to be a very nice campus setting that'll flow with some common spaces. And again, reflective of the University of Nations Kona mission and their purpose as they work with both their students and faculty in implementing their programs. So I like to always come back to these feel images. That's really how the campus is going to look and feel going forward in terms of character fitting to the Kona community. We do have a short presentation. So our next steps for this draft EIS, we're going to be buttoning up the final pieces. Flying over here, I've probably found a couple dozen things I want to make better in the book, but we're just final edits and getting it packaged up. And then, I hope Dan's got coffee because there's going to be some reading coming up for this, and the team will have that over to you. We're saying on the 30th is our target for delivery on that. So Office of Planning and Sustainable Development will have an opportunity to go through the review, as well as the county will be provided a copy. And we look forward to your input. I would call this maybe a completeness review prior to publication, and how the input is received based on this screening level review doesn't really represent you. There would be an opportunity for more formal comments during the publication and agency and public comment period that'll run for 45 days once we publish. So, potentially, publishing in late July or August. It's going to depend on the substance of the comments and points that the staff come up with in the review, any input in that process. But our team is ready to go to print and move the ball forward. So that basically concludes our brief presentation on the EIS side, and I'm glad to respond to any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, stand by for questions. We'll allow you to complete your presentation.
That is the completion of our presentation.
Very good. Okay, so let me get back to my script here. Commissioners, do you have any questions at this time for the petitioner? Mr. Atta.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I've had some background. I worked on the master plan about 20 years ago. So, but it's been quite some time, so I don't think I have anything that would prevent me from commenting. But.
Thank you for that disclosure. So I'm going to ask the parties if you have any issue with Commissioner Atta continuing on this matter as a commissioner, petitioner.
None from petitioner. We thank Commissioner Atta for his time.
Thank you. State,
None, thank you.
county.
None for the county. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna, Mr. Darrow, if you're gonna be speaking, I'm gonna put you on thank you. Do state your name, affiliation.
Aloha, Chair Giovanni and members of the Land Use Commission. My name is Jeff Darrow, Deputy Planning Director for the County of Hawaii Planning Department.
Thank you. Mr. Darrow, to testify today, will it be the truth?
I'm sorry?
Will it be the truth?
Of course.
Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any further comments or concerns regarding the disclosure made by Commissioner Atta? Seeing none, Mr. Atta, thank you for your disclosure and please continue. Are there any other disclosures? Hearing none. Oh, Ms. Cabral.
Since we're into disclosures, as I did yesterday, I will disclose again that I've worked with the county planning department and specifically Jeff Darrell on many different projects here on Hawaii Island over many years. And I don't have any problems with this. It's all on a professional basis. Thank you.
Thank you. So petitioner, any issue or concerns with Commissioner Cabral continuing?
None for petitioner. Thank you.
State, any concerns?
No concerns, thank you.
And county?
None from the county.
Thank you. Fellow commissioners? Hearing none. Ms. Commissioner Cabral, please, thank you for your disclosure and continue as planned.
Thank you.
Okay, think further. My neck's getting worn out here. Okay. Okay, commissioners, any questions that you have for the presentation by the petitioner? Commissioner Kahele.
Chair, I don't have a question on the presentation, but I was looking at the 2022 report and I apologize, I wasn't here as a commissioner. So all of the work that's going to be used is going to be work that's going to be done by volunteers. No one get paid,
Hello,
donated labor.
Commissioner Kelly. I wouldn't say all of the labor, a good portion of it, a large portion of it will be through the Youth Builder program that the university does. This is a program that builds facilities around the globe. The university is tied into a sort of a global network of campuses. They have a very far reach and they have access to a lot of very talented and experienced people that donate their time to help with their projects.
So most of it is going to be donated labor.
I don't want to say most of it because I don't know that to be certain, but a good portion of it will be.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Cabral.
Ooh, my static personality. I've heard several hearings on this matter over the years, my 8 years here, and I've got to ask, aside from, what always looks good on paper and screen, on the property right now, exactly what's going on that piece of land at this time. Can you give us an update on that?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Cabral, for your question. The vast majority of the petition area is vacant, undeveloped. As noted in the staff report, there's an existing agricultural park. It's a research and agricultural park that was disclosed to the commission back in, I believe, 2019 with our position statement on the order to show cause. I believe it was page 29. Admittedly, we probably could have done a better job of keeping the commission more updated with those activities. But essentially, it's an extension of the university's program, and it's an agricultural program. They teach students how to innovate in agricultural fields. Often these students will go out to developing nations, remote islands in the Pacific, and try to help teach the residents there how to do agriculture with the supplies they have. And often that takes a lot of innovation. They obviously don't have nurseries and whatnot. So that's why you'll see some things there that look like a pallet turn into a raised bed or a drum turn into hydroponics. That's intentional. I would also note that the decision order, what we cited when we disclosed those agricultural activities and sort of the extension of the campus back in 2019 was to note that the decision order, the 2003 decision order in this docket did have about a 5-acre expansion of the existing campus onto the petition area. So that's just something we noted at that time. As also noted in the staff report, there are 2 temporary tents sort of on the boundary, but both these activities are on the boundary of the petition area and the existing campus. Those are temporary makeshift tents that have been up for a little while. They were a huge asset to the university during COVID. It allowed them to hold classes outdoors and with moving air during a time that was very much needed. So to answer your question, those are the 2 active uses of the petition area.
Are there people living on the property at this time?
I do not believe so.
So
No, there are
no students should be living on the property. Any other staff?
no students, no dwellings, no inhabitation of that nature.
So any structures on the property would all be educational type classrooms or growing centers?
With the exception of the 2 tents, agricultural, educational structures.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Can you explain or go into a little bit more detail on how you make sure that the construction work is supervised by licensed contractors and is built according to code and so forth?
Yeah, I may not be the best person to speak on that, but they certainly have a lot of experience doing that. The existing campus they have, I think, was purchased 40 years ago with several dilapidated buildings. You know, since then they've built out a pretty nice campus. I think the current replacement value on those buildings is about $109 million. So they have a significant construction experience, but perhaps I can get a representative from the university here to answer that. I have Tom Waddle come up. He's one of the members of the project development team. Sit right here.
Mr. Waddle, please state your name and affiliation, and then I'll swear you in.
Sure. My name's Tom Waddle. I'm a construction management consultant and volunteer at the university.
Mr. Waddle, do you swear that the testimony you give today will be the truth?
Yes, sir.
Please proceed.
Yeah. Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. Can you go into a little bit more detail on how you ensure that the work is supervised by licensed contractors and where these contractors usually come from or plan to be coming from? And how do you ensure that the work is performed according to local codes and standards?
Yeah, great question. All the work that is underway and has been underway at the campus is all permitted to start with. Permitting obviously is going to require stamped drawings, engineered architectural drawings. The model that we've been proceeding on is we have a general contractor that obviously pulls the permits and has a representative staff for every project. And then we have project managers or superintendents that are either on staff or are volunteering. And then we have a traditional rigorous review and inspection by not only the architect of record, engineer of record, but also the electrical engineer, the plumbing engineer, et cetera, who are on the record drawings. I've been actually personally involved in the process. I'm an old guy contractor from the 70s. So, and as such, my personal experience has been as a contractor to actually be part of that staff that oversees the construction. We have a number of volunteers that is the model. At one time, we've had up to 100 volunteers on campus, and each trade is supervised and ensure our quality is there. We're 100% compliant, have 110% commitment to building per code, per drawing, and et cetera. So that's been a pretty successful model. My personal experience on projects I think we've built out almost 40,000 square feet of buildings from 1985 when I first arrived and just are finishing a tenant improvement currently of about 40,000 square feet, all inspected. When we engage in subcontracts for like electrical, plumbing, fire alarm, HVAC, many of these subcontractors allow our volunteers to work alongside of them to help save costs. But of course, the licensed subs who are pulling permits or overseeing the work and they have a reputation, you know, to make sure somebody from New York who's volunteering and knows the code in New York, but doesn't necessarily know the means and methods here is complying with what we want to do here. So it's been a pretty successful process and I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Just one follow-up. Are you from here? Are you a local contractor licensed in Hawaii?
I moved here in '85 and was working on staff with the campus for about 4 or 5 years. I went into the community, got my own contractor's license and stayed here till like 99 and then had a chance to take a different job in Florida. So I let my license expire only to come back in 2006 by invitation, renewed my license from that, wearing a general contractor hat. And then I moved to Florida, to Dallas about 2010 to help my dad who became ill. Thought I was going to stay there, let my license expire one more time. And he passed away a while back and had a chance to come return, but I don't have a license now. I've had one twice. And I've been a general contractor, project manager, consultant. Right now, I was the construction manager for Merrill Development during the heyday of the Henry Street, Walmart, you know, Safeway, Borders Bookstore, and et cetera. So I've got a lot of local experience. That's pretty important around here, as you know.
Do you employ sort of a in-house roving contractor, or are you that person who would be the consultant that works on other projects in other campuses, but you're working on this one now here? Is that the process?
Yeah, we typically will have at least one professional, right, on projects. We currently do not have any projects under permit that we're doing. We're doing more maintenance at the moment, but when we do have a project that is permitted, and even on the maintenance side, we have, you know, skilled people overseeing, you know, the different departments.
And one final question. The contractor, the RME, the responsible managing employee, will that be a local person or will that be a company from out of state that hires a RME to represent them?
Right. The current project we're finishing, the contractor license, the RME is on staff and has been on staff for 10 years here. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Just a follow-up clarification question. Who is the general contractor who has actually pulled permits from the county once the plans have been approved by the county?
Let me get Mr. Waddle back in here just.
The current contractor is KJ Walk. Warren Israelson is the principal there, and David Drawn is his RME who's been on staff for about 10 years and lives here.
So KJ
Walk. Yeah. KJ Walk Inc.
You know how to spell the walk?
WALK. Warren Israelson is the owner and principal of that company.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Okuda.
Thank you very much. Mr. Waddle, maybe I have a few follow-up questions. I'm sorry. Based on what Commissioner Lee and the chair had asked. And I can't give you specific citations, but this comes out of HRS chapter 444, which since you've had contractor licenses issued by the state of Hawaii, that's the governing section of the HRS, the Hawaii Revised Statutes that governs contracting. So my questions deal with contracting activity as defined by chapter 444, which is basically any action that's being taken to improve the real property. Now, using the definition under HRS chapter 444, is it your testimony or the testimony of the landowner here that everyone who has done work on that site to improve the property, anyone who's done contracting work as defined by the statute, has either been issued or at the time held or holds a contractor's license issued by the Contractors Licensing Board or the state of Hawaii, or the person is a bona fide employee, meaning a bona fide employee of the contractor, meaning that that person is on that contractor's payroll, covered by workers' compensation, TDI, and health insurance and the other requirements of Hawaii laws and employee? Or are there some people who are doing work on the property, improving the property, who did not hold a contractor's license or were not bona fide employees of a licensed contractor?
I think I understand your question. All the permitted work is done under licensed, either general contractors, licensed electricians, licensed plumbers, et cetera. They employ their own personnel, so they'll have their employees. But we do supplement them with volunteers. Volunteers are not paid. They're not employees of the general contractor or the subcontractor. And they have a legal form that they sign that is typical of any nonprofit, whether it's the Red Cross or World Vision or United Way, that come alongside of the projects that we do. I'm not sure if that's answering your question.
No, that's very helpful. Do you agree, or maybe you probably know, that chapter 444 essentially makes it, I think it's a crime, it's a misdemeanor, as my recollection is, to basically use someone else's license to do work which normally requires a contractor's license. You do recall that as part of the statutes, chapter 444. In other words, there's a pretty strict prohibition against unlicensed contracting work, which includes a potential criminal penalty.
Yeah, if I understand your question right, so for example, if we didn't pull a permit for the most current project we have is the tenant improvement. It's about 40,000 square feet. So all the electrical work is done is overseen by the permitting electrical contractor who has a license. Same with the plumbing, same with the fire protection, same with the air conditioning. So there's no work that is being performed that requires a permit by a subcontractor that's being done by a non-licensed subcontractor that we're paying. All the work is being done by license holding subcontractors. Our volunteers will work under them, but I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No,
if I understood it correctly.
No, your explanation is helpful, that your volunteers work under a licensed contractor. And let me just preface or give you the reasons why I'm asking this question.
Sure.
Because, if someone is injured in a property and the injury is traced to the failure to comply with certain code requirements or other standards of practice regarding the industry.
Yeah.
What I don't want is somebody turning around and saying, well, you Land Use Commission, or you, Mr. Okuda, Commissioner, you knew about this, about a potential violation. I'm not saying there is a violation. That's why I'm inquiring into this.
Sure.
But, you know, I don't want people to say that we as a government agency had notice of a health and safety requirement, and we didn't do our due diligence and inquire into it. And as a result, some injury which might have been avoided was not avoided. And now we have, you know, people who are hurt. Let me ask you this question. Are you aware of any administrative rule or decision by the contractor's licensing board or court of law, and you can inquire with your attorney regarding that, which has held that the Chapter 444 requirements of work being done by a licensed contractor or a bona fide employee of the licensed contractor, that there is an exception for unpaid volunteers. In other words, as long as the person is an unpaid volunteer, that somehow an exception to the requirement that all work, all contracting work as such term is defined by Chapter 444, that there's an exception to the requirement that the work be performed by either a licensed contractor or a bona fide employee of the licensed contractor. Are you aware of any exception to Chapter 444 that says volunteers is a carve out or exception on this otherwise strict requirement that you have to have a licensed contractor doing the work?
Yeah, good question. I don't have a legal background, and so I'm not privy to, I don't know an answer to that. I know that there are so, like, take the same application for Habitat for Humanity. They'll have some projects that's similar to ours. They'll have a ton of volunteers. So, and I know our attorneys have drafted, you know, the right volunteer format or form to fill out that addresses issues like workman's comp and et cetera. And I know the campus has its own insurance policies that deal with these things, but I'm not personally aware of the details of them or have a detailed answer for your question.
Yeah, well, as you kind of alluded to, there's some practical implications here. For example, since construction activity is many times not considered by workers' compensation insurers as a low risk situation, and there's significantly higher premiums than, for example, somebody who might be working on a computer terminal typing out legal documents at our law office.
Right.
There's a recognition that there is significantly more risk to someone to be injured, doing construction. What if a person was a bona fide employee of a licensed contractor, that contractor would be required to carry workers' compensation insurance and the employee would be protected. What kind of protection do these volunteers receive for injuries which they might suffer by volunteering on the property?
Not certain of what our insurance carrier provides for that. I know that, and I'm not sure how the industry at large deals with that either. Whether it's our campus or other nonprofits that are engaged with volunteers. It's obviously a pretty common practice, but I don't have a specific answer for that. I don't know.
Yeah, and you understand that just because something's a common practice, we at the Land Use Commission, because we're quasi-judicial, we're essentially required to follow strictly the requirements of law, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, just for me personally, or I'm sorry, Mr. Simon.
Yeah, Commissioner Kuda, I apologize. I don't mean to cut you off. I would just wanted to note that, we absolutely understand the concerns you're raising. I'm not a chapter 444 expert. I've appeared before the contractor board several times, but haven't dealt with this issue. I think it is certainly something that we can provide more clarity to the commission on. We weren't prepared to speak on this today. I don't mean to interrupt your question either, but I just want to commit to you that we can help dig in. Like Tom pointed out, there are other organizations, Habitat for Humanity, that do this. Whether or not that is something that contractor license board has approved, is something we can try to find more clarity on. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that, I think it's, without the statute in front of us, it's a little hard to give you direct answers.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily expect, an answer to that question, because it would be unfair for me to, or any of us to expect you to give a definitive answer without you having prior notice of the fact that that was an issue. So kind of giving you the semi-prior notice here. If I can ask kind of like a related follow-up question, just a foundational question. And let me preface my question by saying this is the reason the admonition of warning Supreme Court in the DW Ainalea development versus Bridge Ainalea. Pacific 3rd, 685 at 709 to 710, where basically the Hawaii Supreme Court is telling the Land Use Commission that we, the Hawaii Supreme Court, don't want situations where requirements or conditions are placed on property for development or other things, and these conditions are not met because that just leads to a host of public policy problems. So in other words, the Hawaii Supreme Court is telling us on the Land Use Commission that we basically have to hold applicants to the conditions that have been imposed or required as a condition of a boundary amendment. And just so that no one thinks that I'm just making this up, this is the quote from from the case. It says, and I quote, "The Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources specifically noted that, quote, vacant land with the appropriate state and county land use designation is often subjected to undesirable private land speculation and uncertain development schedules," close quote, and that, quote, such speculation and untimely development inflates the value of land, increases development costs, and frustrates federal, state, county, and private coordination of planning efforts, adequate funding. We carry out our obligations under the Bridge Ainalea case and the statute. So let me first ask you this, Mr. Simon, you made reference to the decision or order regarding 2022 status report hearing, which was filed in this docket on December 8, 2022. Looking at that document, did you see any statement in that document, the decision and order, which you believe is erroneous, misstated, or really shouldn't be there in that document?
I've absolutely read the document. I've read, I've gone through it. Nothing comes to my mind at the moment. You're a fellow attorney, so you can always, nitpick a little deeper when you need to. So not off the top of my head, I believe it's an accurate portrayal of what occurred at the November 2nd, 2022 status report.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to know if something just popped out of the document. So just so that, if we're kind of reading literally off the same page. Okay, this is a reference to paragraph 28A. And it's a statement here, and I quote, "When the petitioner accumulates enough donations and revenue generated, the petitioner will then enter contracts for construction. Okay, so my questions deal with that reference in the decision and order. And anyone on your team can answer the question. Will the EIS include some type of spreadsheet, budget, projection? I'm not an engineer, so I don't know whether the term is really correct about, like critical path analysis or some kind of evidence or bunch of evidence which will show what the projected donations and revenue are projected to be generated over a specific amount of time, and kind of reference to the amounts that are going to be anticipated to be entered or spent for the construction, just so that when we use the EIS as a decision-making tool, we can really tell whether or not this project is going to be financially viable and what the benchmarks are, or whether it's not financially viable. And so then we're going to be starting to look at this admonition of the Hawaii Supreme Court saying, hey, we got to do more than just simply take people's word. We have to have admissible evidence to back up the decision.
Thank you, Commissioner Okuda. The content requirements under Chapter 343 and the implementing regulations don't generally address this issue. The status report in November 2022 was requested that construction cost estimates be included, and we've committed to that. It does not at the moment include projections as to financing or fundraising options. The EIS is an environmental disclosure document. It doesn't approve a project. It's a document that the commission would use to inform its decision on a motion to amend that would actually approve this project. And traditionally that is usually the time that the commission will look at things like financial viability and stuff like that. There's the posture of this docket is unique, and I think we've always been very honest about that. But again, from our point of view, we listened to what the commission said back in November, and that was a request for a construction cost estimate by phase, and we've included that.
Okay, and maybe I shouldn't have limited, or made it seem like the requirement is that's in the EIS. My question was just whether or not it would be in there. But at some point, you do agree that, or at least I think, and you don't have to agree with me, that I believe for us to exercise our duties under the Bridge Inalea case, we're going to need to see evidence that this case is not speculative, and evidence in addition to simply testimony under oath that, rely on us and our good faith. I'm not saying anybody's lying or anything like that, but we probably need hard admissible evidence to, determine financial viability.
It has always been the petitioner's expectation that information will be required and vetted by the commission. Again, in our mind, that's something for the commission to consider on a motion to amend to update the docket, as opposed to the environmental disclosure environmental impact statement.
Okay, and let me just kind of follow up on another point that was raised in the questioning here and the testimony here. And my question deals with what's going on the land, which is subject to this petition, and the land which is going to be covered by the EIS. So are there dwellings or structures presently existing on the land that is going to be covered by the EIS?
There are no dwellings on the petition area.
Or structures, or any kind of structure.
Yeah, but I want to be very clear about the dwelling portion. There's no dwelling, there's nobody living on the petition area. There are agricultural structures that are part of the agricultural park. Some of those are shown in the photographs taken by staff back in, I believe it was April. Those were constructed under the understanding that they were exempt agricultural structures, that HRS 48688, I believe, provision of the enabling statutes for zoning have exemptions for certain agricultural structures. And that is in the university's mind, those are compliant, but again, that's something that the university is certainly happy to engage with the county on.
Okay, well, and that leads to my follow-up question. First of all, these structures, and I shouldn't have used the word dwelling because that has a specific legal definition. So strike my question as to dwelling. Let's just use the term structure, meaning whatever is actually existing now on the property, which basically didn't grow out of the ground or wasn't like a geologic formation. Okay, so regarding structures on the property, were all those structures constructed by a licensed contractor or someone who was a bona fide employee of the licensed contractor?
I cannot myself speak to that, but Mr. Waddle may, and he may not.
Most of the existing structures are there, but prior to my time frame here, so I don't know the answer to that question. I know that when they've done some projects, typically the staff has a well, the RME, from KJ Walk is on staff, so I just don't know how engaged or not engaged they were. Most of those structures are less than 600 square feet and are all ag related. Like, for example, I know there's a chicken coop and there's a few canopies that cover the aquaponics. So they're pretty insignificant structures that I'm aware of, but I wasn't around when they were constructed, so I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, well, not to be too nitpicky, but Chapter 444 doesn't contain an insignificant exception to the requirements. And so, but let me just get back to this. So you can't tell us one way or the other whether or not these structures were constructed by a licensed contractor or a bona fide employee of a licensed contractor, correct?
I can't. No, I can find it out for you. I don't know that answer right now.
And right now, because I don't want to belabor this point, but no one sitting here in the room today can answer that question, whether or not the structures were constructed by a licensed contractor or a bona fide employee of a licensed contractor, correct?
I do not believe anybody here can answer, but again, we're more than happy to provide additional information on that.
Has anyone from the county of Hawaii given any type of approval of these structures, including a building permit or a certificate of occupancy or a statement, either oral or written, telling you or anyone on your team or anyone part of the university that these structures are acceptable?
We had a review by the building department starting in 2020 of every structure on campus, including the 60 acres. And in that review, some structures were deemed to be unpermitted. And so I think they were originally structures that were made for temporary construction, protection of lumber and et cetera, that got repurposed. So the campus, and I was on staff then in 2020. The county rep for the building department looked at everything on the farm and on the existing campus. We made a pretty thorough list, and the campus has removed every building that was in question, that was repurposed, that maybe started as a temporary construction protective covering, and that got repurposed as something else. So campus was like 110% committed to complying with every thing the county had asked. At that point in time, there was a conversation about the dwellings in the not dwellings, the structures in the farm area. And conversation was basically, hey, they are under 100 square feet, they're ag purposes and don't require a permit. Oh, 600 square feet, sorry. But all of that was pretty much an email, so I don't know of any specific document that took them off the list per se. It was.
So perhaps some of the structures, in your view, still might not be compliant with the requirements of the County of Hawaii?
In the farm area, I don't know of any that aren't compliant with that code, you know, of being not requiring a permit if they're less than 600 square feet.
Okay, well, just so that I'm clear, and I promise you this is my last question. So right now, anyway, is it your position? When I say your position, I mean the university's position, your group's position that you are totally compliant with county requirements regarding the structures on the property, or you're not totally compliant, or you don't know?
I think it'd be a little bit of a blend. As far as the farm is concerned, I'm not aware of any structures that are not compliant. Our position with the county has always been 110% cooperation. And so if they have come up with something that they deem is non-compliant, we will make it compliant. You know, we're 100% committed to that, but I'm not aware of any of the structures in the farm that have that status.
Oh, okay. And because again, just so that I can frame the basis of my question, you know, there was once a fire in Palolo Valley, kind of like down the hill from where I live, and someone died in the fire. And there was a big, not a big, but a significant claim being made that, you know, this was not clearly a permitted structure, and that led to an injury. And I want to make sure that we on the Land Use Commission are exercising our due diligence to make sure that, you know, we have compliance with the law. We can all disagree about whether certain requirements make sense or not make sense, but as long as the legislature and the applicable administrative agencies, whether it's the county or the contractors licensing board, have these legal requirements, we on the commission are duty bound to carry it out. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Okuda. We'll take an 8-minute break. We resume at 10:15. Sure. Okay, back on the record at 10:18. Is the recording in progress? Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Commissioners, additional questions? Or the petitioner, where are we? Commissioner Lee.
Thank you, Chair. For the petitioner, Mr. Simon. For this project, in the past or in the future, have the funds used to construct a project been derived to any extent, either directly or indirectly, from public resources, public funds, grants, bonds, things like that?
No funds of that nature, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioners? Chair has a few questions. I'd like to start with your annual reports to the commission on the status reports. Can you remind the commission when those are due or scheduled?
I believe the date is August 8th on a yearly basis. I believe that's the anniversary of the 2003 decision and order. I may be off by a day or two. I believe I have August 8th.
And was the one that was due last August, we received several months later. Is that correct?
I have a copy right here. Let me, I don't want to give you the wrong answer. Is the one from 2022 is file stamped by the commission August 8th, 2022.
Okay, so the next one is due
August 8th, 2023.
Okay. So I would The chair would like to encourage you to put a lot more detail in your report in a couple of areas. Kind of addressing the general concerns that you may be hearing from commissioners here today. One is, I'd like to, do you have a budget for the project, for the build out of the project, a general budget, high level? How much is it going to cost?
We do, and that will be included in the EIS as we committed.
Do you have a preliminary number you can share just so we can, is it a bread box or a fire truck or a?
Let me see if I have that. I should have that. Just give me 1 second. I want to save Mr. Waddle another trip up here, but I might need him here in a sec.
Okay, take your time. Here comes Mr. Waddle.
So he's not going to tell you, but he's going to give them to me. Hold on. I have, you want a phase by phase breakdown?
Sure.
So as general contractor estimated cost for phase one is just slightly over $31 million. Phase two is just
Let's call him.
I have to explain that.
Go off of this one.
Okay, my apologies. Let me just give you some figures and we can explain them. Phase one is 20,000, just over 20 million for phase one. Phase two is just slightly over 50 million. And phase three is about 85 million. And so those estimates I just provided include adjustments for volunteer labor.
Which leads me to my next question. What percentage of the 155 million is volunteer labor?
So that is an adjusted number. So the actual cost without the volunteer labor is about total for the project is 267 million.
So you have a $267 million project, of which 112 million would be volunteer labor.
I think it's just slightly below that number, but yes,
Here
that was,
comes Mr. Waddle again.
yeah, save me, Tom.
I think that cheat sheet. I've got another one in mind. Yeah, and doing the forecast for the budget on this, using some actual cost, updated square foot budgets. Obviously, it's a concept estimate right now.
Sure.
Historically, the campus has saved approximately 40% in a project. And where that's derived from is we have a contractor who typically has no overhead and profit expense or charge to the campus, it's all volunteer. And so they're not charging a profit margin. And we're experiencing the same thing on each sub-trade level. So we may experience an overall and even on the architectural side. So when you look at hard cost, soft cost, you know, for a project, we got a volunteer architect, we got a volunteer contractor, and sub trades that we're not charging their percentage. So by the time we accumulate all that and then supplement on the labor side, we have an overall experience of about a 40% savings. Obviously, not all of that's just because of labor. In fact, a majority of it is non-labor, but markup fees and et cetera. And general conditions.
What is the preliminary schedule to complete phases 1, 2, and 3?
Um,
In other words, is this
it's a 30-year project.
okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
I have a
think-
breakdown of the phases.
I don't, other than just in my head, honestly, yeah.
And I think Jeff or I can speak to this as well.
Okay.
We're back. I believe the current phasing of the phase one is projected to be about a 5 to 10 year phase. And both phase and 2, the subsequent phases are projected to be about 10-year phases that each.
And that's all delineated and described in the draft EIS.
Chapter 2. That's correct. And I will note that the figures Tom is giving, Mr. Waddle's giving now are pretty consistent with the 2020 estimates we provided at the July 2020 status report. So there's been some changes, but the costs have not gone up.
So in my head, and I'm just doing some quick math as you were, Mr. Waddle, but that equates to that volunteer contribution is very significant, and the commission understands that it's probably critical to the overall success of the project. But the 1 million, pardon me, the $112 million of savings due to volunteerism. I mean, a rough number I would use in my own head is about $100,000 a year for a volunteer working full time, depending on the volunteer. That's 1,120 man years of volunteerism that would be contributing to this project. That's enormous amount. So I hope you can appreciate that where the commissioners are coming from, that with an effort of that magnitude, 1,120 man years of volunteer labor equivalent. Somebody's going to get hurt. We want to make sure that protections are there, the procedures are there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking a lot closer to that. And one of the things that I'd like to ask as a kind of a related question is about your bookkeeping. Do you keep track of the efforts, the volunteer labor hours and the aid labor hours that are used for this project?
We make an attempt to do that. It's not as good as I'd like it to be, but we do have those. We do keep track. Yeah.
Let's say, just hypothetically, let's say I'm a volunteer and I'm very interested in helping you. How does that work?
Yeah. We currently, I'll give you an example. This
Hypothetical example, yeah.
Yeah, okay. We have there's a friend of the campus who's a contractor in Kansas City. And he brings a team over twice a year, and there's about 20 of them approximately, maybe 25. And they stay probably two weeks. And so we exchange room and board, for their stay. We obviously organize the work at hand. They may have some electricians that are hanging drywall, because we're hanging drywall at that 2-week period of time. So it requires a lot of flexibility on the behalf of those who are volunteering. Some of them are giving up their vacation time. Some are retired. Some are between jobs. It's just all over the map. When I was on campus in the 80s, for example, we had up to 100 people at a time from different nations. Not all of them even spoke English. OSHA safety is always number one. And so on the supervisory level, we not only have to have materials and tools and et cetera, but all the safety equipment and supervisory staff to oversee the work in whatever capacity it might be in. I'm not sure that answered your question, but
It kind of answers the question of how you get the people on to show up. It doesn't address my earlier question of how you keep records of who's doing what.
oh, okay. We keep track of how many show up and where they're staying and how long they're staying and the like, the day-to-day, like what would be a daily log, basically. We haven't been as diligent as we could be on that in terms of, okay, we've got 3 guys hanging sheetrock today and 10 framing or whatever. That's not as diligent as it could be.
Yeah, that's the notion that I think we're taking, and we're encouraging you to be a whole lot more diligent as you go forward with a project of this magnitude. And I would imagine that the county would be interested in that diligence and as well. Can you describe in greater detail what you mean by the word oversee? When you have a licensed contractor that oversees these volunteers that show up by the tens and hundreds,
Sure.
weeks at a time?
Yeah. I'll just use my own experience to try and answer that. When I was on staff and we had up to 100 volunteers at a time, we had a staff of maybe 10. I wore the superintendent hat. We had a staff who was the foreman for the framers. We had a staff person who was the foreman for the cabinet, the finished carpenters, staff person, foreman for the plumbing and electrical and site work and heavy equipment and et cetera. So
are all these staff people you're referring to, are they licensed contractors or are they volunteers?
they were all, some were licensed, some were volunteers and this was back in the 80s, keep in mind, but we had a licensed contractor doing the work and which was not uncommon back then for general contractors to do a lot of work in-house. And so they'll have their own foreman, leading the framing crew or whatever the case may be. So in each case, the volunteer was overseen by what would be a working foreman in whatever the trade might be.
So the general concern, as you earmark on a $250 million project over the next 30 years, the general concern that you're hearing from the commission is that you're getting someone who happens to have a license to use that license to pull permits. And you start the work. And he's graciously saying, you can use my license, be happy to oversee the project, but you get your band of volunteers to do all the work and you just manage yourself.
I see what you're saying. No.
And that's
Yeah.
what it looks like to some of us might be the case. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And I think the county would like to avoid that as well.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and that isn't the case of what we implement. No, it's not a scenario where the license holder says, hey, go after the volunteers. No, we have a staff that is responsible for overseeing every volunteer, what they do, how they do it, when they do it, OSHA compliant, the whole 9 yards. Yeah.
And so what I would encourage you to do and what this commission will be looking for as part of your annual reports is documentation that is actually being implemented accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah, we can do that.
We would encourage you to do that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And it's consistent with our practice too. So we'll make sure and provide that.
So our staff was able to make a site visit on, I think it was April 12th, 2013, and not just a short time ago. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend that site visit. I have seen the photographs. I think copies have been put before you of some of this, what have been referred to as agricultural structures or temporary structures. I certainly hope that the quality of work that goes forward for this $260 million is not reflected in these temporary structures. If you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of the visit, and I would have really welcomed the opportunity to show staff and the council all of the work we actually have done, where we've just finished and are waiting for a CO on a 40,000 square foot, classroom build out. And we've got almost 400,000 square feet of campus, structures that are quite well built, and all by this process. So we certainly welcome another visit so we can set the record straight versus maybe the experience you had while there.
We'll accept that invitation and look forward to it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm gonna leave it there for today. Thank you. Commissioner Cabral.
Yeah, don't leave yet. I don't know who the right person is, but my business in property management, I deal with a lot of contractors, a lot of vendors of varying degrees and skills. And even I deal with volunteers in homeowners associations and that who want to have their own little, we'll fix it up ourselves party. And all of this additional information makes me extremely concerned because I know that I cannot compensate anyone more than $1,500 for any work that they do. And I cannot compensate them with a cash on top of the table, under the table, or even a free trip to Hawaii to have them do that work. Okay. So I'm really concerned, and I obviously the organization has done this all over the world, all over the other states. We are here in the regulated empire of Hawaii, where if you look at this, and I'm really concerned because I can't do it to maintain my homeowners as volunteers can't do some of these things. And it's clear that even in these makeshift structures that are all over the property, there's electrical wires running overhead and lights and all types of things. And there's water hoses. So there's plumbing coming in from somewhere. So I wasn't there, so I don't know. But I am extremely concerned that you are setting yourself up with this volunteerism and stuff that is going to be in violation of the contracting laws in Hawaii. And then in Hawaii County, absolutely, you have to have a licensed plumber to do everything, plumbing, everything, and a licensed electrician to do everything. I mean, I personally can change the outlets and the light fixtures and have done it in my own home, but I cannot go do it anywhere else. So right, Jeff, I can't do that. And I can't even, I'm even supposed to change the toilet guts in your toilet, at somebody else's place. So I am very concerned over this plan moving forward to save this $100+ million based on volunteers that, to me, that million sounds like it's more than $1,500. So I'm concerned. Okay, I don't know what else to say. And but you better have the lawyers check with it, because the other thing is too, you're right here. You're going to be under open site. I get reported to agencies if they think I do it wrong. I mean, because so you're going to have other contractors. If they're not busy enough, they might be looking at what you're doing to report you. And also neighbors, hey, again, it's the regulated. We respond to every complaint and gripe from every griper in town. I can say these things now. I'm on my way out, but so I'm very concerned about how the plan to move this project forward is built on quicksand. That's my concern. Thank you. That wasn't a question. Sorry. I'll let you have an answer. You have an answer.
I do have one comment.
Okay.
And I've worn a property management hat before as well, so I understand exactly your experience. The campus does have two distinct entities. One's for maintenance and one's for new work. The maintenance would be like any other school maintenance department. Oh, we got to replace this toilet. We've got a leak in the roof. Let's bring out the roofing subcontractor. We have our own volunteer staff to do whatever is possible to do. And there's a line in the sand when there's anything that is of substance that we bring in a licensed electrician, especially. But anything on the permit side is like 110% compliant with contract law. So that's our commitment, and that's been our practice. We're not perfect at it. We're trying to get better, but I understand those concerns and certainly agree with them. Yeah.
Well, the concerns coming up with all this financial plus this long track record of things shifting all the time, and that's our job, is to try and make sure that projects moving forward at least start in the right direction. Okay. And this has already changed channels a few times. So it's a really big concern. But since I'm just commenting, it's a really valuable piece of property you have there that you folks have owned for a long time. I would almost suggest you should look at, I'm in real estate. I could help you sell that for a lot of millions and then go buy less expensive property somewhere that would be easier to develop. It might still be ag, but you already know how to get ready for that to come to us. But, up like where the new county buildings are and all of those there's a lot of structures in different areas now that everything's kind of moving north. The land is still everything's got a slope, but your piece of property is very challenging. You might look at that math. That might have some positive numbers for you. Anyway, thank you very much for indulging me. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further? Commissioner Okuda.
Yeah, to Mr. Simon, it's really up to you what you want to include in your status report or not. But you might consider addressing the issue about the aiding and abetting statute. And just so that it's clear on the record what it says, I'm citing or quoting from HRS section 444-9.3, which is titled aiding and abetting. And this is what section 444-9.3 states, and I quote, aiding or abetting an unlicensed person to evade this chapter or knowingly combining or conspiring with an unlicensed person or allowing one's license to be used by an unlicensed person or acting as agent or partner or associate or otherwise of an unlicensed person with the intent to evade this chapter shall be a misdemeanor and may be subject to and may subject the licensee to additional discipline by the board, close quote. So you might consider addressing those concerns that we raised in your status report, but it's really up to you what you want to do.
Absolutely, Commissioner. Your point's well taken. The issue's been raised. It's.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, anything further directly for the petitioner at this time? You'll get another opportunity. Okay, so let's thank you very much. We'll shift gears to the counties for a presentation on the record.
Good morning, and I think I'll offer our Deputy Director, Mr. Darrow, an opportunity to address you.
Thank you, Mr. Darrow. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the Land Use Commission. The county continues to support the project. The project is located within the Kona urban area. The proposed request of this amendment to the state land use boundary amendment is supportive. We are anticipating the submittal of the draft EIS so that we could review. We appreciate the commissioner's comments this morning regarding all areas that were spoken about. In regards to the issue of structures that has been talked about this morning, the planning department, to my knowledge, has not received any type of complaint for the activity on the property. Just from personal experience, working with our inspectors as well as inspectors from the Department of Public Works, we do receive complaints on a pretty regular basis for structures within the agricultural district, whether it's state land use or county. And there are many times that these structures are falling under HRS 4688, which is an exemption clause from the building permit process. Our county does have a simple declaration form that is needed to be submitted in regards to those. But it does exempt from the overall building permit process. Again, county has no further comments. We are in support of the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Darrow. Questions? No. Commissioner Okuda.
Thank you much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Darrow, good to see you again. With respect to the property which is subject of this hearing today, has that declaration which you described been submitted regarding the structures on the property?
Not to my knowledge, but if it was submitted, it would be submitted to the Department of Public Works Building Division and not to the Planning Department.
So is it true or not true that at this point in time, the county cannot definitively tell us whether or not these structures are, for lack of a better term, legal or illegal?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No further questions.
I had the same question, but can I ask from the other end, Mr. Simon, has the petitioner ever submitted this form for the exemptions for the structures that it is built?
I can speak to my personal knowledge and that I can also confer with them. I think that these structures have been there for a while. I don't know if everybody necessary to answer that question is here with us. I know they went through a detailed process with the county to get other buildings in compliance. They'll do that. They're 100% committed to doing the same here. I just don't know the answer to your.
Yeah, I think the question is for the exempted structure, the structures, not for the permanent structures that you've dealt with the county on the existing development, but on the specific land where you've in the photographs of the temporary or agricultural structures, they've been given different names this morning. Now we're hearing from the county that those can be exempted from permit provided you file this form. And the county can't tell us because Public Works is not here today, whether that form is on record. So I'm asking you to do your research and in your August 8th annual report, please affirm or clarify the status of the process that you've gone through to get those structures exempted from the permitting process and erected.
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Cabral.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Mr. Darrow, is my understanding of those potential agriculture buildings that could be exempt, they would still require a permit and would not be able to be exempt from any type of permit if they were to have electricity coming to or servicing that building. And I'm not sure about the plumbing status, but am I correct on the electrical?
Yes, you are correct. Once there's electrical or plumbing within that particular structure, it triggers the need for a building permit as well as the electrical and plumbing permit.
Thank you.
This is the chair, so it does appear from the photos that some of those structures have both plumbing and electrical. So let's just look to get the situation clarified on a going forward basis. Again, Ms. Darrow, thank you for being here today. It's good to see you again. Can you explain a little bit the process at the county on a going forward basis for the proposed structures? I know that we haven't seen the EIS and you haven't seen it, but starting with the submittal of construction drawings, the review and approval process, the issuance of permitted drawings and plans, who has the authority or the qualifications to receive them from the county and then proceed to implement? And then what inspections, whether they be courtesy inspections or formal inspections, are done, and then close out of permits? Just describe the process, soup to nuts, please.
Just for clarification, you're asking mainly for the building permit process? Okay, so,
Yeah, not the temporary structures here. We're
Yeah.
talking about a real permanent building.
we're not talking about, once the state land use boundary amendment is approved, the zoning process. We're talking mainly the building permit. Both the planning department and the Department of Public Works have moved into an online system, and it's called Epic. The contractor would submit plans through Epic, which are reviewed through the Department of Public Works Building Division, as well as electrical plans, plumbing plans, and everything. They have their set schedule for inspections, starting with, they may have to come in, which I would gather they come in first with grading or grubbing permits. So they would come in and work through that process. That would be, excuse me, reviewed and approved and inspected in regards to the grading activity. I would anticipate they would probably work together concurrently, submitting building plans. During that time, once they begin construction, they would have forming inspections. And then from there are several different inspections as the construction goes vertical, as well as electrical and plumbing inspections. Ultimately, it results in a final inspection. I can't answer specifically how much the building department or any of the inspectors really takes a look at who is building and that process. I think they mainly rely on the contractors submitting the plans. Again, I'm just not sure. I've never really looked into that particular area of construction. But I think moving forward, it's something that obviously all of us have learned something from, and including the petitioner. And I'm sure that moving forward, that will be on board and on track. But hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that answers most of it. Thank you for that. And I know it's a complicated process. The one part you kind of skipped over intentionally or unintentionally, and maybe but if construction plans are developed by, let's say, an architect and submitted, we're talking vertical construction now. I presume those can be submitted by an architect, but once they're reviewed and approved and stamped by the county, does it require a licensed contractor to receive those drawings, to receive the permit directly?
My understanding for commercial structures such as this, it would. There is different allowances for homeowners, but in this particular case, my understanding it would be a contractor, a licensed contractor. Correct.
Right.
And the plans are normally submitted by architects.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So the license, so the architect does his job, you do your job, the licensed contractor shows up, pays the fee and signs out, and he can go to work.
Right.
Now it's up to them to implement the work
Yeah.
with the presumption that it'll be performed by licensed contractors. Or qualified contractors, qualified personnel, I'll say. Subject to inspections and final and approvals.
Yeah. And again, I'm unclear as to the allowances in regards to who works on the project and those kind of things. But obviously I've learned a lot today.
Yeah, and the reason that we're zeroing in on it, you're talking about a $225 billion project, of which 40% is done by temporary volunteers that come here 2 weeks at a time, as an
Yes.
example.
As a, just to add on to that, they have to pass each of these inspections. And I know and I'm sure others know, it's not an easy process to pass a building inspection or an electrical or plumbing inspection. They are very, very thorough. Some of them, to the point that they measure the distance between nails. It gets a little crazy, but
yeah.
So, I think when it comes to the inspections, they're looking at the product. I don't know, again, how much they look at the actual labor. I think they again rely on who's there at the inspection and who's responsible, who submitted those plans. Ultimately, they're responsible.
I agree. That's the way it's. Yes.
I might also add that for the next meeting of Land Use Commission, if the land use would like to invite Department of Public Works, we could invite them to this fora to explore in better detail how the work is actually supervised, the actual labor.
I think that's a great suggestion for this particular docket. For this, as this docket continues and comes back before us, I think the Department of Public Works would be welcome.
And we would share the concerns that have been expressed today with the department so that the staff, the individual attending that meeting is able to respond to your concerns.
Yeah, I think we all want the same thing, including the petitioner, the county and the State Land Use Commission. We want good plans. We want them executed appropriately and according to law. That's all we want. Okay, anything further, Commissioner? Okay, thank you, County. State?
Thank you, Allison Cato for OPSD. Similar to the last November, we're still in the EIS phase, but it appears that petitioner is on schedule with respect to the DEIS. Based on the presentation, the DEIS appears to include many updated pieces, and OPSD looks forward to receiving a copy for their review and comment. Regarding changes to the master plan, the elements that benefit the larger community appear to be either maintained or improved with respect to access. And we hope that petitioner continues to take care with respect to community outreach and addressing concerns and impacts to the community. We appreciate the concerns raised today, and we also hope to see a more detailed annual report regarding petitioner status. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions for OPSD? Commissioner Okuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Cato, again, it's really up to you what follow-up you'd like to do, but if I can ask, if you find it reasonable, if you can consult with your counterpart over at the DCCA, specifically either the Regulated Industries Complaint Office or the Contractors Licensing Board, to see whether or not this type of use of volunteer labor in the manner that this has been described at today's proceeding creates any issues of concern under Chapter 444. So it would be either or both of someone at the Regulated Industries Complaint Office of the DCCA or the Contractors Licensing Board, or both. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Commissioner Cabral.
I might want to suggest if we could add to that list the employment offices too, because if the requirement with workers' compensation and how exactly people might, there are going to be regulations on what a volunteer can or cannot do. And some of that might even depend how many feet in the air they can work, you know, and things like that, how tall a ladder a volunteer can go up. So again, University of Nations of Kona should be checking all of that, their legal department in Hawaii. You know, it's not a universal law, but employment, what happens with the employment status and workers' comp to cover somebody is, I think, and I don't, that's who I always have to deal with. So I don't know where else you would go, but that would be what the state agency on that might be able to provide some insight on what we need to also make sure is and they're going to be in compliance with moving forward. Okay, thank you.
I'll discuss with OPSD and see if we can figure that out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further? Okay, thank you, Ms. Gato. So petitioner, any additional comments you'd like to put on the record?
Yeah, I'll be brief. Again, want to thank the commission and staff for today. It's not always fun, but it's a little pain here and there, but I think it's good, and it makes sure that it ensures that we are all on the same page and avoids surprises down the road. And so in that sense, I appreciate it, and I know my client does as well. You know, as Mr. Overton explained, I think we're on track. We are on track to get the draft EIS delivered as promised. We think it's a good document, and we look forward to comments and feedback on that. We've heard the commission's concerns, a number of them, both with respect to, you know, annual report and the more information the commission would like seen flowing in, as well as getting clarity on some of these other issues related to volunteer work and stuff. So with that, I just want to thank you all for your time again.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. I didn't go into it in detail, but one other area that was just briefly mentioned by Mr. Overton had to do with the dormitories that will be in the new plan. So we'll wait and look forward to that detail when we see the draft EIS.
Yeah.
But that whole idea of bringing in a temporary workforce and exchanging them housing and where you're going to put them in these dormitories and workers, students, volunteers, it's, you know, we're aware of the housing and visiting personnel crises in that part of our state. So
Absolutely.
please put some detail in on that.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Mr. Kabal.
Yeah. One more thing, at some point in time, and I'm remembering back to all these different hearings, so I can clearly be confused, circuit overload. But at one point there was affordable housing was going to be provided as part of this project. Is that no longer in the mix and I missed it, or is that in another phase of this mix, or is that, did I misremember it?
No, there's even going back to 2019, a lot's happened. So let me try to help you understand a little bit. The petition area was approved for the district of boundary amendment in 2003 for a market rate kind of higher end condominium project, and there was a cultural center and some campus expansion as well. Shortly after that, the university realized that really wasn't what they did. They weren't commercial real estate developers in the sense that they were developing stuff for market sales. So there was an attempt in 2006 to come back and amend the decision and order to basically align with similar to what they're proposing now, which is actually just a campus expansion, so they can continue and expand their ability to do what they do. Fast forward to 2019, the university came before you and presented the commission with a new updated master plan that they wanted to do. Similar to what was presented in 2006, they wanted to expand their campus and get rid of that market rate housing. And that's sort of starting in 2019 with that plan, that's kind of carried forward today. We discovered that we triggered chapter 343, have to go through the EIS process and whatnot. As part of that, there's no more market rate housing being developed. And so when I think it was in 2019 or 2020, we had discussions with the county office of housing and provided them a copy of our master plan, and they determined that the dormitories don't trigger the housing code. Normally residential development will trigger the housing code. And in reality, the dormitories are low income housing. I mean, the students at the university, David could speak to, but I think they basically are able to go to the university through donations they receive from family and friends to allow them to go on that. I think the average donation that enables them to do so is about $15,000, and that's, more or less what they live on for the year. The university's been very active in providing affordable housing outside of this petition area and project. They renovated over 120 units immediately next door at the Kama'aina Holly housing development. I believe it was an HHFDC affordable housing project that basically fallen in disrepair. I think something like 70 or 80% of the units had become unrentable. And so they took that over, and now I think 127 units. Don't quote me exactly. It's over 120 units are now back and occupied by people qualifying for affordable housing. So what happened in 2020, or at the November 2022 status report, the issue of affordable housing came up as it should. It's something that we need to discuss and talk through. And a number of commissioners, including chair, basically brought up the fact that by expanding the campus, you're bringing in more staff and faculty. And so we need to look at what we can do to help, or at least ensure that that doesn't impact or degrade the existing affordable housing stock that's already, under tremendous pressure. And so since November, in making some refinements to the master plan, they added 5 more dormitories specifically for long-term staff. So that, even though we're bringing, as the campus expands, there's already more dormitories for students, but for the longer term staff they're actually going to be on the island for more than a semester or a couple quarters, they're going to have housing that will prevent them from going out into the community and taking affordable housing opportunities from others. So that's sort of was a very long-winded way to try to address your question, but I hope that was helpful.
So there's still, that's still part of the mix, and we'll learn, or my fellow commissioners will learn more with all of the additional reports coming in.
The additional dorms for people working for the university, but not, the master plan does not include, offsite or onsite affordable housing for
Outsiders.
For outside, I don't want to say outsiders, but for members of the community, meeting certain AMI thresholds.
Okay, thank you very much for the update.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, for bringing that up, and Mr. Simon for your response. Anything further? Okay, it's time for our final round of public testimony. Should anyone in the room wish to provide public testimony at this time, please let us know. Ms. Kwan, has anyone signed up for public testimony at this time?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Further discussion up to the commission. So commissioners, this is a status report. We're not required to take any action at this time. And if no action is taken, the requirement of the continued annual reports will remain in effect, meaning that we'll see an annual report on August 8th, 2023. Also, we will expect that our staff will receive the preliminary Mr. Overton's binders or thereof at the end of the month to our staff on the EIS, and that we're hopeful that within 30 to 60 days subsequent to that the draft EIS will be publicized. Is that correct, Mr. Overton, in terms of a general schedule?
We can get feedback if there's asked question, supplemental information. It takes time, but that's our plan.
Yeah, so the EIS process has a life of its own, and it's good to see that it's on track for the next critical step. So we'll look forward to that. We can decide after seeing your status report whether or not, your annual report, whether or not we want you to come and talk to us again in terms of a status meeting or the like. But let me open it to the commissioners. If you feel that you have any concerns at this time on the process that I've just outlined going forward, and you'd like to, if your concerns have not been sufficiently addressed, it's your opportunity to ask for any specific actions you'd like the commission to take. Commissioner Cabral?
Everybody else.
Nobody's talking. It's all yours.
Okay, well, it could be my last action. Over my years, I get more and more concerned that these things just not, it's everybody's fault. Let me blame everybody. The bureaucratic procedures and the time frame involved with this just drags all of this stuff out. And I think I am, and clearly some of this is the environmental impact statements due June 30th, and we're here on the 22nd, and we're going to have it on June 30th. So deadlines are important, and we sort of push and rush to get those. So I would hate to have this wait another for the annual report to come in and no action. So I would like to request or make a motion, let's say, that this body reconvene after the environmental impact statement's been available and reviewed, and is the information requested by all the parties of how labor is going to be done with volunteers, and how they're going to be protected and in compliance with state and county ordinances. I request or move that another updated hearing be scheduled. And obviously everyone has to figure that when that can happen, but within 6 to 8 months, instead of just letting it go on for another 6 to 8 years. So
Commissioner Cabral, are you specifically moving that we are requesting LUC staff to organize a follow-up status report in some specific time frame?
yes, I would say that we look to trying to have one in 8 months.
Okay, 8 months is a good number. So that would be, see, this is June, so it'd be next
February.
February.
Yeah, or before then. I mean, the idea that, you need 3 months or so for the EIS. They're going to need time to check on everything. That shouldn't take that long. And then before you know it, it'll be Christmas and no one wants to meet Thanksgiving or Christmas. So that gives you January or so, okay. Trying to make it reasonable,
Okay, so-
or sooner is better when you got the answers, but.
I'm going to interpret the motion to be a request for a follow-up for another status report before the commission next February 2024 or sooner, as determined by communally between the petitioner and the LUC staff.
Correct. Thank you.
Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Commissioner Otta seconds the motion. Any further discussion? Take a roll call vote on that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion is to request that staff schedule a follow-up status report hearing in February 2024 or sooner. Commissioner Cabral,
Yes.
Commissioner Otta,
Yes.
Commissioner Kamakeo Hello.
Aye.
Commissioner Kahele, Commissioner Okuda,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioners Yamane and Ohigashi are excused. Chair Giovanni.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, you can come as a community witness at the time. At the time, you see what's going on, right? Okay. Commissioners, do we have any further discussion or business you'd like to bring up at this time? No further discussion. Thank you, parties, for your time and energies today and for the work that you've put in up to now. And this concludes our meeting. And if not, I declare it adjourned. Thank you.